Counting at the Mvomvo Lodge voting station in Umzimbuvu region in the Eastern Cape. It says that the ANC won 11 votes out of a total of 24. Let's take you to the Eastern Cape now, where our reporter Asanda Mbetshe joins us from the IEC Results Operation Centre in East London. Asanda, good morning to you. Tell us about those early results that are trickling in.
Welcome to the Operation Centre right here at East London. We've asked to talk about what has been happening throughout the province. We are joined by our analyst, Jolene Steyn-Kotte, but we will be chatting to her a bit later in this segment where we're talking about the Eastern Cape. For now, when we look at what has been happening in the province throughout this day, earlier in the day we had a report from the IEC that villagers at Nhlangano in Dabankulu had decided that they would not be participating in this year's election. 591 people were registered to vote there, but decided that they would not participate. The MEC for Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, Fikile Kasa, flew into that area to try and negotiate with the community, but they were adamant they would not vote. Now, that's not the only area in this province that has had problems. At Matatiele, also in the Eastern Cape, there was service delivery protests where communities were protesting about housing, sanitation, access to clean water, and other public service issues. Now, our colleague Atule Joga was in the Matatiele region, and he compiled this report for us.
This polling station has 121 registered voters. Only 2 people cast their ballot. The rest of the village abstained.
Okay. Our main problem here at home is that we really suffer in water matter. We really need water here. They promised us that they will find a way how we find water here around in our rural area. And they promised us the toilet, of which they told us there is money for the toilet, there is money for the water, as they are doing in other places. They are busy working on the water matter, but they are not doing it in a way that they were supposed to do.
Attempts to persuade disgruntled residents to vote failed. The municipality responded to complaints about water.
Yes, I said it's not true that in the last 25 years nothing was done in Ward 15. I said this is the second project. We had a water registration project that was implemented across the villages of Ward 15 under Chief Libenya, but the scheme collapsed simply because it was vandalized by the same community. Then coming to your question now, I had said there is a contract on site by the name of Dwala who's doing registration in 2 villages. Then before the end of this month, we are going to appoint the service provider who's going to finish the work that was started by Annex, the service provider that we had terminated our services with them. Then we had agreed simply because we had lost MIG allocation due to non-spending as the district. In our turnaround strategy, we agreed that all the projects that we are going to implement in the next financial year, all their procurement processes should be concluded before the end of this financial year. I then committed to him that I can safely say by July, work will be starting in Ward 15.
There was also a community protest in a nearby village. Atule Joga, SABC News, Matatiele.
As mentioned earlier, we are joined by analyst Jolene Steyn-Kotte to talk to us a bit about some of the service delivery protests that have been taking place in the province. Now, Jolene, service delivery protests are not new. They've been happening throughout the years, but there's been a particular spike as we get closer to elections. We've had service delivery protests over the past 2 days when special voting was taking place. What do you make of this, where communities are now protesting against their right to vote?
I don't think necessarily think it's a question of communities protesting against their right to vote. I think what we are looking at, especially if we look at the socioeconomic the demography of the areas in which these protests are taking place, we're at the 25 years of democracy mark, and in many cases there has been a lack of development or underdevelopment in those areas. So I think you are looking more at communities trying to find some form of agency or voice in order to get attention for the particular issues that they deal with, which are basic issues of water, issues of sanitation, roads, for example, and then one can take it further and start looking at education and health provision as well.
Earlier in the day, the MEC for Cooperative Governance flew into Dabankulu, where a community was saying we will not participate in this election, to negotiate with them and try to get them to vote, where he was saying, what are your issues? And they were talking about roads, water, and he was saying we have processes in place to deliver this. Do you think those negotiations maybe came too little too late?
I think it's not necessarily the negotiations coming too little too late, but rather a question of service delivery, basic service delivery coming too late. We have to remember that these are areas that are predominantly ANC electoral support. The ANC tends to get anything between 83 to 89, in some elections 90% of the vote. So these are strategically very important areas, and this for me is a form of communities exercising their power to try and hold the ruling party in the province accountable for not necessarily delivering on that dream of democracy of a better life.
We're going to have the discussion further about exercising the right to vote. Another group of people that also exercised their right to vote today are inmates who are at the East London prison right across the Buffalo River at West Bank. Our colleague Janine Lee spent the morning there as they voted. Let's take a look at that insert.
Placing 240 prisons throughout South Africa today, with 11,000 prisoners registered to vote. But at each election venue or voting station, there's always a sniffer dog to sniff out contraband. And here at the prison in East London, it was no exception. So let's have a chat to this little guy who's one of the sniffer dogs. What's your name? His name's Fritz. Fritz, how long have you been doing this job? Since 2013. And do you enjoy it?
It's going all right.
Yep, Fritz enjoys the job, but he says to me what he enjoys more is working for the reward after the job, and that's a ball. Fritz, should we ask your handler if he can give you a reward, seeing you have done a bit of work this morning? You'd love that. Okay, he's going to love that. Let's have a look. There you go. All work and a bit of play. But have a look what happened today during the course of the morning in the maximum prison here in East London. 245 prisoners voted, and it was smooth sailing. Take a look. It was a steady stream of voting prisoners at the East London Maximum Security Correctional Facility. Voting took place under the watchful eye of party agents, warders and IEC on hand to make sure voting flowed smoothly. The low registration figure of inmates has been attributed to the fact that many leave their ID books with their families for safekeeping. Others cannot afford the 140 rand needed when applying for an ID book at Home Affairs. While most inmates were excited to vote, they were not aware that there were 26 parties contesting the election in the Eastern Cape and 48 contesting nationally. Janine Lee, SABC News, East London.
Well, that group of people is not the only group of people that got to vote in the Eastern Cape today. Whilst Janine was at the prison, we also took a drive around East London to talk to other people who had just voted, to get an idea of what they would want to see happen differently. Most people spoke about jobs, the need to create jobs, but also the need to improve public services, your roads, your water, your healthcare. As we mentioned earlier, we are with our analyst, Jolene Steyn-Kotze. Jolene, the first round of results have come through for the Eastern Cape at Umzimbuvu. Talk to us about why that particular area is important.
Well, I think that particular area speaks a lot to the challenges that communities who are engaged in almost boycotting the vote and protesting, so to speak. You're looking at an area, for example, that is in the Alfred Nzo municipality. In 2016, that particular municipality was found to be one of the worst places to live by the Deprivation and Comfort Index developed by the South African Institute of Race Relations. If you look at the Umzimbuvu community in particular, predominantly female-headed households at 57%, 70% of people are in informal employment, so you're sitting with a high level of vulnerability. Only 31% of people, for example, get water from a river instead of having running water in a house, and 86% only have a pit toilet, not necessarily a flushing working toilet inside the home. And one can carry on and break down the socioeconomic profile of what this community looks like. And that speaks to, we are still sitting with some of the same challenges 25 years into our democracy.
Does that speak to some of the issues or some of the reasons why some communities have been protesting today and saying we will not take part in this anymore?
No, definitely. I think, as much as the Premier highlighted that there are formal processes, you're looking at a ward committee representation, for example, to try and get these issues on the table. And for some reason, there seems to be a disconnect between communities, their representatives, and almost delivering the goods at the end of the day. So it's not surprising that communities are now starting to work outside those processes because they feel maybe their voice is not being sufficiently heard.
But Jolene, why is there a disconnect when you have a ward councillor, when you have a mayor, when you have an MEC, you have a premier, you have a national minister, and you have a president? There's so many layers that people should be able to be in touch with their government. Why is there this disconnect?
We're also looking at a very factional ANC. So factional politics, for example, plays out. We cannot ignore the Auditor General's reports on when they audit governance within the Eastern Cape. And we tend to not fare well when it comes to transparency, accountability, and responsible spending of money on developmental projects. Key to our challenges is a lack of oversight, wasteful expenditure, the inability to account for how monies are spent. And it's that funding that should actually go towards delivering this better life that people have been waiting for 25 years.
Is there enough of a conversation, though, with communities about holding their councillors to account timelessly so that people don't wait until it's closer to election to say, but the road you promised hasn't come through. The clinic doesn't operate in the number of hours that we need it to.
Those types of conversations would have occurred throughout the last 25 years. So there could be a sense from the community that, these sentiments or these requests or needs are falling on deaf ears. And because we don't seem to make progress within the formal processes, we would much rather now operate outside the processes. For example, the community who didn't want to vote, the negotiation process, yes. That is a form of a community-seeking agency trying to say, listen, we are no longer just going to give you our vote, we want to see the goods delivered.
I want us to talk a bit more about this issue, but before we go there, I want to give our viewers a snippet of what some of the people we met on the streets in East London said they would like to see done differently going forward with the next administration.
Health, education, social services are more important, but really more focus around economic development, right? In terms of small enterprise development, I think those are our key focus areas because small businesses will be able to support us with the jobs that we require.
Jobs, more jobs, and
come back. We'll talk about expectations and new entrants.
More improvement in our roads. Some of our roads are very bad, and we travel long distances. And we bug our vehicles, so it should be improvement there. But basically, things will come right.
We need to create job opportunities, and also we need to make sure that we support the businesses. And we need to make sure that there's dignity in the country, the leadership is strong and is supportive in all angles. And we need to make sure that our communities are also supported, especially the rural areas, make sure they are developed so that our country can move forward.
Well, what I would like to see is them start at the bottom, work with the people that really need help, and then get to, these type of suburbs. But it's the people at the bottom that have got nothing that need the help the most.
Well, Jolene, some of the people in our inserts were talking about the things they would like to see done. They want to see jobs for communities. They want to see improved services for the lower income groups, for the lower end of our communities. An issue that comes about is new players in the game. We now have ATM that's making inroads in the Eastern Cape. We have EFF that's growing. How do their manifestos or the issues they raise related to some of the issues that people want to see done differently going forward?
I think it's not just the new kids on the block, so to speak, their manifestos, but most political party manifestos actually spoke to those issues. For me, a key thing to watch in terms of what is going to happen in this province, which is particularly important for the African National Congress, of course, it is the heartland of the ANC. Most of its leaders were born and bred here, our great struggle and liberation heroes. So, we have to see to what extent voter turnout. We were talking about Umzimbuvu, for example, and in 2004 you had a voter turnout of 81%. By 2014 it was only 67%. So voter turnout for me will be key to watch. And also to what extent the ATM will be able to indeed make inroads, considering, we had one by-election where we saw the ATM enter the political space. So we kind of need to see how that dynamic is going to play out, considering that the UDM, EFF and ATM, DA as well, are kind of fishing from the same pond at the moment.
When you're talking about that, there isn't much expectation for the ANC to lose majority in the province. But can we expect any surprises, briefly?
I think yes, the ANC would most probably take the province. For me, I think the key surprise would be by how much.
That is an interesting view. We will see how much. It's a discussion that's been going on even nationally on how the majority party or the governing party would fare this time around compared to previous elections. That's something worth watching into going to tomorrow morning, or rather later into this day, as we're already on results day on Thursday. The first round of results has come through already from the Eastern Cape at Umzimbuvu. We'll be looking right here at the Results Operation Centre in East London for more results as they come through during this evening and later into the day. But with that, we're wrapping up from the Eastern Cape. Let's go back to Pretoria.
All right, thank you very much. We're actually coming back to Joburg. Thanks very much to Asanda. They're coming to us from the Eastern Cape, where those first election results have come out. And you heard the question there is how much the ANC will win by, but they are saying that the ANC should take that province there. So, of course, Asanda will keep us updated as to the goings-on in the Eastern Cape throughout this morning with myself, Flo Ladwaba. Let's take a short break for now. More of